People always say that life is short, but at 68, you realize that it's also damn tricky. You wake up in the morning with one set of thoughts and go to sleep at night with a completely different set. I always considered myself a person with my feet firmly on the ground, but over the years I've come to realize that plans change as quickly as the colors of the fabrics in my store. My Livewood is not the trendy town you see in commercials. It's a place where everyone knows everyone else, where the supermarket clerk remembers what kind of bread you like, and where passersby say hello even if they've never seen you before. 30 years ago, Lloyd and I chose this town for its cozy mediocrity. It's a good place to raise children, grow old, and not be afraid of change. There's hardly any. I've been the manager at Elmer's Fabrics for 25 years. It's funny that there never was an Elmer. The owner, Mr. Gardner, just decided that Elmer's sounded homey. Our shop is one of those places where people come not only to shop, but also to talk. How many times have I seen women rummaging through rolls of calico, telling me about their wayward children, unfaithful husbands, or how their parents are aging? I always listen and nod. Over the years, I've become something of a town psychologist, only instead of a couch, I have a counter with fabrics, and instead of a diploma, I have gray hair and wrinkles around my eyes. Lloyd died 4 years ago. He had a heart attack in the garage while changing the oil in our old Ford. We were together for 45 years, and his absence still feels like a phantom pain. Sometimes I still cook for two or turn around to say something to him. The house we bought 30 years ago and paid for over so many years now seems too big and empty. It's a two-story house with 3 bedrooms and a garden where Lloyd planted apple trees. They still bear fruit, and I make apple jam that no one eats as quickly as they used to. Lloyd and I have 2 daughters. Paisley, the eldest, inherited her father's practicality and stubbornness. She is 42 and runs her own hair salon in downtown Livewood. Her husband Ezra works for an insurance company, and they have 2 teenage children. Ruby is 16 and Tim is 14. Paisley always knew what she wanted and went after it. Even in school, she worked part-time cutting her neighbor's hair and saved her money. She and Ezra bought a house before their children were born and never asked us for help, even though we were always willing to lend a hand. And then there's Dylan, my youngest, 38 years old, but she still looks like she's 17. Dylan has always been a dreamer. As a child, she drew imaginary animals. As a teenager, she dyed her hair every color of the rainbow. And in college, she changed her major 3 times but never graduated. Now she works as a salesperson at a home appliance store, and she's been there longer than anywhere else. Almost 2 years. She was married to Gordon, a programmer with a strange sense of humor and a complete lack of domestic skills. They divorced 3 years ago when their son Frank was 7. Gordon pays child support, but not regularly, constantly citing problems with contracts and clients. Since the divorce, Dylan has moved 4 times. Each time, the reason was different. Noisy neighbors, an inconvenient neighborhood, mold in the bathroom. But I know the real reason: money. She always finds a place that's cheaper than the last one, and each time it's a more depressing place. Now she and Frank live in a 1-room apartment above a laundromat. At night, the dryers hum, and during the day, it smells like laundry detergent. Frank is a wonderful boy. He's 10 years old and loves to read and build model airplanes. He has green eyes like Dylan and the same unruly blonde hair. He comes to my place every Wednesday and Saturday after school. We bake cookies or work in the garden together. Sometimes he brings his homework, and we go over it. Dylan picks him up late in the evening, often straight from work, tired and irritable. And every time I watch them walk off into the darkness toward the bus stop, my heart sinks. Last Thursday, Dylan came to my house on a day when she didn't usually come. She was alone without Frank, and I knew right away that she needed money. I recognized that look on her face, a mixture of shame, desperation, and poorly concealed hope. We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea, talking about the weather, how Frank was growing, her new haircut. Finally, she got to the point. "Mom, I'm really embarrassed, but I'm desperate," she said, twisting the long cold cup in her hands. A pipe burst in the laundry room and our apartment is flooded. We had to move out. I found a new place, but they want 2 months deposit plus the first month's rent. That's $3,000, and I only have $800. I sighed. 3 months ago, I paid for her car repairs. 5 months ago, I gave her money for the electricity bills that had accumulated over the winter. There was something else before that. I never kept track of exactly how much I gave her. She's my daughter, and that's enough. But my pension and salary as a manager in a small fabric store are not bottomless wells. Dylan, dear, I'm not sure I can find that kind of money right now, I began cautiously. Maybe Gordon could help? It's for his son's housing after all. She shook her head and her eyes filled with tears. I called him. He said he's between projects and doesn't have any money right now. He promised to help in a month, but we need a place to live now. We've been sleeping on my colleague's couch for 3 days. Frank isn't getting any sleep. His grades are slipping. I looked at my youngest daughter and saw the same frightened look she had 30 years ago when she got lost in the supermarket. The same look she had at 17 when she crashed her father's car. The same look she had at 25 when she told me she was pregnant and wasn't sure Gordon would marry her. Is this new apartment nice? I asked, already knowing I'd end up handing over my checkbook. Better than the last one. It has 2 rooms and Frank will finally have his own space. And it's closer to the school so he won't have to travel so far. And there's a small balcony where we can put some flower pots. She kept talking, and I thought about how many plans she had had and how few of them had come to fruition. About how she was always moving in search of a better life, but ended up in an even worse situation than before. About how Frank was changing schools and friends without having time to settle in. About the constant instability of their lives. Okay, I'll help with the deposit, I said finally. But Dylan, this can't go on forever. I need to know that you and Frank will have some stability. She nodded, swallowing tears of gratitude. I know, Mom. I got a part-time job on weekends at the same store. They promised me a raise in 6 months. I'll pay you back. I shook my head. It's not about the money. It's that I can't sleep knowing that you and Frank could be out on the street at any moment. She left with the check and promises that everything would be all right now. I closed the door behind her and stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the photos on the wall. Lloyd with the girls fishing, Paisley at her prom, Dylan with Frank at the amusement park, our house when we first bought it, me on the porch with a basket of freshly cut flowers, Lloyd with a can of paint and a brush. We were so young and full of hope. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned in the bed that still feels too big without Lloyd. I thought about the future, about mine, about Dylan's, about Frank's. At 68, I'm still strong enough to work and live on my own. But what about in 5 years? 10? My savings are dwindling with every new problem Dylan has. What if something happens to me? What will become of her and Frank? Our house is paid off. It's worth at least $300,000, considering how real estate prices have risen in Livewood in recent years. Enough to provide Dylan and Frank with a stable future. Help the boy with college when the time comes. Give my wayward daughter a chance to finally get on her feet. In the morning, I called my old friend Roger Pratt, who works as a real estate lawyer. I made an appointment for 2 days later, taking a day off from the store. Roger welcomed me into his small office, which was cluttered with files. He had known Lloyd for many years and had helped us with the paperwork when we bought the house. Meryl, dear, you look wonderful, he smiled, inviting me to sit down. How can I help you? I told him about my idea, to transfer the house to Dylan but retain the right to live there for the rest of my life. He listened, taking notes from time to time. It's possible, but there are some nuances, he said when I finished. You can draw up a deed of gift with the condition of retaining the right to live there for life, which is called usufruct. But keep in mind that as soon as the house is re-registered, Dylan will become the legal owner. She will be able to sell it, mortgage it, rent it out. Of course, taking into account your right to live there, but still. I understand, I nodded. But I think it will give her the stability she so desperately needs. Maybe she'll even move here with Frank. The house is big enough for the 3 of us. Roger took off his glasses and rubbed his nose. Meryl, I've known you for many years. As a friend, not as a lawyer, let me give you some advice. Are you sure that Dylan is, let's say, responsible enough for such a step? Maybe it would be better to just leave the house to her in your will? I understood his concerns. Dylan had never been particularly reliable, but maybe the responsibility for something so valuable would help her grow up? I think this is a chance for her to change her life, I said firmly. And besides, it's not just about her, but about Frank. The boy needs stability. Roger sighed and nodded. All right, I'll have all the paperwork ready by next week. But think about it again, Meryl. These kinds of decisions shouldn't be made in haste. As I left Roger's office, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if I had made a decision that had been brewing for a long time. Dylan would finally have a solid foundation under his feet. Frank would live in a nice house, go to the same school, make friends without fear of having to move again in a month, and I would be there to help them both. That evening, Paisley called. She calls every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. She told me about problems at the hair salon, that Ruby wanted to go to art college, and that Tim had failed math but did brilliantly at the science fair. I listened and wondered if I should tell her about my decision. I didn't. Paisley had always been too practical, too much like her father. She wouldn't approve. She would have said that Dylan was irresponsible, that she never appreciated what she had, that it was unfair to her, Paisley, who had always done everything right. And maybe she would have been right. But sometimes you have to give a chance not to those who deserve it, but to those who need it more. A week later, the papers were ready. I decided to discuss everything with Dylan after signing. I was afraid she might see it as another attempt to control her life. We met with Roger at his office, and I signed all the papers. Now all that was left was to tell my daughter that she was the owner of the house. I decided to do it on Friday evening when Frank was staying with me for the weekend. I bought ingredients for his favorite dishes and baked an apple pie. I was going to tell Delilah everything when she brought her son over. I imagined how surprised she would be, how she might cry with gratitude, how we would start planning their move, discussing what furniture to buy for Frank's room. I didn't know that instead I would soon be standing in the middle of my own kitchen, listening to my daughter say words that would turn my life upside down. Dylan was 2 hours late that evening. I reheated dinner 3 times and ate almost half of the apple pie. I was nervous. Frank was sitting at the kitchen table, assembling the model airplane I had bought him last week. He hardly spoke. He was at that age when boys become withdrawn. Sometimes I think that at 10 years old, he already understands life better than his mother does at 38. Grandma, do you think airplanes will ever fly on solar power? He asked suddenly, without taking his eyes off a microscopic detail. I think they will, I replied. People are always inventing new things. When I was little, there were no cell phones or the internet. It's like living in ancient times, he nodded seriously, and I laughed. Well, I don't feel that ancient. We just lived differently. We talked more face to face. We wrote letters. Real ones? On paper? His voice sounded genuinely surprised. Imagine that! And we waited weeks for a reply. He shook his head, clearly unable to imagine a world without instant messaging. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Frank didn't even look up. He knew it was his mother. Dylan looked tired but strangely animated. Her eyes were shining. Her hair was hastily pulled back into a ponytail. She seemed to be in a hurry. Sorry I'm late, Mom. She kissed me on the cheek and went into the kitchen. Hi, sweetie. How's the plane? Frank shrugged without looking at her. Fine. There was clearly something unspoken between them. Dylan sighed and turned to me. I don't have much time, Mom. I'll pick up Frank on Sunday as usual. I have a meeting today. A meeting? On Friday night? I couldn't hide my surprise. Yes, work. She waved her hand vaguely. Listen, can I talk to you for a minute? We went out into the hallway. I planned to call her into the living room, sit her down in an armchair, and solemnly break the news about the house. But something in her behavior stopped me. Something happened, Dylan? No, everything's fine. Just, remember the apartment you gave me money for? She spoke quickly. I had to give it up. There were problems with the wiring, I was afraid for Frank, but I found another one, even better. And guess what? It's cheaper. So I have some money left over from your check, and I thought, Dylan, I interrupted her. You already rented another apartment without seeing the first one? She looked away. Well, not exactly. I'm in the process. You know, it's so hard to find something suitable these days. I felt that familiar feeling of disappointment building up inside me, the one that always came when Dylan started beating around the bush. But tonight was a special night. and I didn't want to ruin it. Dylan, I have some news for you, I said, deciding not to put off the conversation after all. I've transferred the house to you. Her eyes widened. What? I've transferred our house to your name, on the condition that I live here for the rest of my life. Roger Pratt helped with the paperwork. It's all official. She looked at me as if I had just told her that aliens had landed on the lawn. You, you're joking? The whole house? To me? I nodded. I thought it would give you and Frank some stability. The house is big, there's plenty of room for everyone. Dylan suddenly threw her arms around me and hugged me tightly. Mom, this is incredible. I don't know what to say. I hugged her back, feeling her shoulders shake. She was crying. A strange feeling of satisfaction and anxiety washed over me. All my life I had tried to protect my girls, to give them everything I could, but I had never taken such a significant step before. Roger has all the paperwork, I said, pulling away. You can pick them up on Monday. I haven't told Paisley yet. I think we should do it together. At the mention of her sister, Dylan tensed a little, but nodded. Of course, Mom. Just, can we not tell anyone yet? I want to think it through and plan everything first. It's such a big step. I agreed. Although deep down I felt a twinge of disappointment. I wanted her to rush over to Frank and tell him how their lives were going to change. But everyone has their own way of dealing with good news. That evening, Dylan stayed out longer than usual. She asked me about the documents, how much the house might be worth now, how long ago the roof had been repaired. I answered, feeling strange, as if I were taking an exam on my own home. Finally, she left, hugging me tightly once more and promising to come by tomorrow after work. Frank stayed with me for the weekend as usual. We baked cookies, watched old movies, and I didn't even object when he asked if he could play video games longer than usual. On Sunday evening, Dylan picked him up, still seeming excited and distant at the same time. I expected her to stay and talk, to discuss our plans, but she just said goodbye hurriedly, citing some business. The next week passed relatively quietly. Dylan called a couple of times, asking about some details of the house. The year it was built, whether there were any problems with the foundation, how well the attic was insulated. I answered, thinking she was seriously considering moving. On Friday, I came home from work and saw an unfamiliar car in the driveway. When I opened the door, I heard voices coming from the living room. Dylan was talking to a man. I entered the room and saw them. My daughter with a notebook in her hands and a well-dressed middle-aged man writing something on a tablet. Oh, Mom! Delana turned to me with a smile that seemed a little forced. Meet Mr. Coalfield. He's a real estate agent. A real estate agent? I looked questioningly from my daughter to the stranger. Yes, I just wanted to find out the current value of the house. Mr. Coalfield kindly agreed to do an appraisal. The man held out his hand to me. Very nice to meet you, Mrs. Hollis. You have a wonderful house in a beautiful location. Properties like this are in high demand right now. I shook his hand mechanically, still not understanding what was going on. Dylan, can I talk to you for a minute? I nodded toward the kitchen. Sure, Mom, she said, turning back to the realtor. Excuse me, Mr. Coalfield. I'll be right back. You can take a look at the backyard. There's a great patio. As soon as we were in the kitchen, I closed the door and turned to my daughter. What's going on, Dylan? Why did you bring a real estate agent? She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. I told you, I just wanted to know the current value. It's important for planning. Planning what? I was starting to lose my patience. The future, Mom. Mine and Frank's. You said yourself you wanted to give us stability. Yes, but I meant you could live here, not sell the house. Dylan finally looked me in the eye. Mom, be realistic. This house is too big for us, too expensive to maintain. I can't afford to pay these taxes and utilities. But if we sell it, Frank and I can buy something smaller, maybe even without a mortgage, and we'll still have money left over for his education. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dylan, I live here. You can't just sell the house. I know, Mom, she said softly, as if explaining to a child. But we can find you a nice apartment nearby. Don't worry, I've thought it all through. I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. Where was the emotional woman who had hugged me a week ago with tears of gratitude? Where had her insecurity gone? Standing in front of me was a person who had already planned my future without even bothering to consult me. I'm not going anywhere, I said firmly. We agreed that I would retain the right to live here for the rest of my life. Yes, but that doesn't mean in this house, Dylan replied impatiently. You can have that right somewhere else. Mr. Coalfield explained how it works. I felt something break inside me. Did I really know my own daughter so poorly? Or had this house, which had suddenly become hers, changed her so much? I'll talk to Roger, I said. He won't allow such an interpretation of our agreement. Mom, Dylan sighed with that particular expression of patient exasperation I remembered from her teenage years. The house is mine now, legally. I can do whatever I want with it. On Wednesday, when I came home from work, there was a van with a construction company logo in front of the house. When I went inside, I heard noise and voices coming from the second floor. Climbing the stairs, I found two men removing wallpaper in the room that had once belonged to Paisley. What are you doing? Asked I, not recognizing my own voice. One of the workers turned around. We're removing the wallpaper, ma'am. Miss Hollis ordered renovations. What renovations? I felt panic rising. Stop immediately. Ma'am, we have an order. The wallpaper was already torn off half the wall. You'd better talk to Miss Hollis. I went downstairs and dialed my daughter's number. She didn't answer. Finally, I sent her a message. Why did you send the workers? Stop this immediately. The reply came 10 minutes later. The repairs are needed to increase the value of the house. Don't interfere with their work. I stood in the middle of the living room, clutching my phone, feeling my world crumble. The house I had considered my own was turning into a stranger's space before my eyes. Dylan arrived that evening. She wasn't alone. She was with a man in an expensive suit. I sat in a chair in the living room, staring out the window, the lights off. Mom? Dylan flipped the light switch. What are you doing in the dark? Oh, this is Mr. Lang, the buyer I told you about. He wanted to take another look at the house. I slowly turned toward them. The man looked slightly embarrassed, but Dylan didn't seem to notice the awkwardness of the situation at all. Hello, Mrs. Hollis. Mr. Lang nodded. You have a beautiful home. I know, I replied dryly. I've lived here for 30 years. Mom, Dylan's voice took on a note of irritation. We're just going to look around the house, okay? Mr. Lang wants to make sure the renovations are going in the right direction. The renovations you started without my permission, in my house, I said, not moving an inch. In my house, Mom, Dylan said quietly but firmly. Legally, it belongs to me. Mr. Lang shifted from one foot to the other. Perhaps I should come back another time. No, it's fine. Dylan grabbed his arm. Come on, I'll show you the second floor. The workers have already started renovating. They went upstairs, and I remained sitting, feeling like a ghost in my own home. I could hear their voices discussing the redesign, tearing down the wall between two bedrooms, replacing the bathtub with a shower stall. When they came back down, I was still in the living room. Mr. Lang muttered something polite and quickly left. Dylan closed the door behind him and turned to me. Mom, you're acting like a child. I understand that change can be difficult, but this is for the best for all of us. For the best? I almost laughed. You're kicking me out of the house I've lived in for half my life. The house where your father died, where you and Paisley took your first steps. And that's for the best? It's just a house, Mom. Walls and a roof. Her voice was impatient. Mr. Lang is offering a great price. With that money, Frank and I can start a new life. What about me? What about my life? I told you we'll find you an apartment. A cozy one on the ground floor, closer to the city center. You won't have to walk so much. It'll be easier to get to work. I looked at her and didn't recognize her. My dreamy, impulsive, always needing help Dylan was gone. Standing in front of me was a cold, calculating woman who had already decided my life without asking my opinion. I'm not moving, I said firmly. This house is mine, and I'm staying here. Dylan narrowed her eyes. Mom, don't make this difficult. The deal is final in 2 weeks. You have time to pack your things and say goodbye to the house. I've already found an apartment for you and will pay the down payment from the sale. You can't just kick me out. I raised my voice. I have rights! Rights that can be exercised elsewhere, she snapped. I consulted a lawyer. Everything is legal. I couldn't take it anymore and shouted, "A lawyer? You didn't even wait for the ink on the documents to dry. You planned to sell the house from the very beginning." Dylan lost her cool confidence for a moment. "That's not true. I I just realized that this is the best option for all of us. I need financial stability. Frank needs a future, and you need a place where you don't have to worry about shoveling snow or fixing the gutters. Don't lie to me." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "I've known you your whole life. You've never been able to lie." She was silent, looking away. Then she suddenly straightened up, and her face hardened again. "Fine. Yes, I planned it." Gordon refused to help pay for Frank's college. He said it was too far away and he wasn't obligated. And the house is our family's only asset. It's the only way to secure Frank's future. "What about my future?" I asked quietly. She shrugged. "You'll live in an apartment I'll find for you. The money from the sale of the house will pay for it for years to come. You'll be perfectly safe." "Safe?" I shook my head. "Dylan, a house isn't just walls and a roof. It's memories, a sense of belonging. It's part of me." "Sentimentality," she snapped. "We can't afford sentimentality, not in our situation." I looked at my daughter and saw Lloyd's shadow in her. The same stubborn chin, the same determination in her eyes. But Lloyd had never been cruel. He had never put practicality above human feelings. "I'm not leaving," I said firmly. "You may legally own the house, but you'll have to call the police to get me out." She looked at me with a long, cold stare. "Don't be dramatic, Mom. You know very well I won't do that. But you also know you have no choice. The house is sold. I found you an apartment. Life changes and we have to adapt." With these words, she came up to me and put her hands on my shoulders. Her touch was light, almost gentle, but I saw no warmth in her eyes. "Thanks for the house, Mom," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But now I don't need you. Get out." I stood there, stunned by her words, unable to believe they were coming from my daughter's mouth. The daughter I had raised, read bedtime stories to, comforted after nightmares and her first heartbreaks. The daughter to whom I had just given the most precious thing I had, a roof over her head and our family legacy. And at that moment, I realized that I had lost more than just a home. I had lost my daughter. I don't remember how I left the house that evening. I only remember the feeling that what was happening was unreal, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life instead of living my own. Dylan's words rang in my ears. "Thanks for the house, but now I don't need you. Get lost." Such a simple phrase, but it broke my heart into a million pieces with every repetition in my head. Somehow I found myself at Paisley's house. I don't remember how I got to the bus stop, how I rode the bus, or how I walked the last block. I just stood in front of my eldest daughter's neat two-story house, clutching my purse, unable to bring myself to raise my hand and ring the doorbell. The door opened by itself. Paisley stood in the doorway, wearing an apron, her hair tousled, looking at me in surprise. "Mom, what happened?" I opened my mouth to answer, but instead of words, the sobs I had been holding back all evening burst out. Paisley was instantly by my side, hugging me and leading me into the house. "Tim, pour Grandma some tea," she ordered her son, who had peeked out of the living room. "Ruby, get the guest room ready." She sat me down on the sofa and covered me with a blanket, even though the house was warm. She brought me a cup of tea with honey, which I always gave her when she was sick when I was a child. She waited patiently until I calmed down enough to speak. "Dylan," I finally said. She's kicking me out of the house." Paisley frowned in confusion. "What? Out of your own house? How can she kick you out?" And I told her everything. About my decision to transfer the house to Dylan, about the real estate agent's visits, about the repairs, about the buyer, about those last terrible words. Paisley listened, her face changing from bewilderment to shock, then to anger. "I always knew she was irresponsible, but this is just monstrous," she said when I finished. "How could she?" I shook my head. "She says it's for Frank's future, that selling the house will pay for his college and my apartment for years to come." "She doesn't care about Frank!" Paisley exclaimed, jumping up from her seat. "She's never cared about anyone but herself. God, I'm going to call her right now and tell her what I think." She grabbed her phone, but I stopped her. Don't, honey. It won't change anything. The house is already in her name. She has a legal right to it. But she has no right to treat you like that. Paisley was furious, her cheeks flushed. Mom, you gave her your house. The house you and Dad bought where we grew up. Yes, I did, I said, feeling exhausted. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving her a chance at stability. Paisley sat down next to me and took my hands. You always wanted us to be happy. You always put us first. And Dylan, she took advantage of that. She took advantage of it her whole life. I wanted to protect my younger daughter, to tell her that she was just confused, that it was hard for her to be alone with a child. But the words wouldn't come out. At that moment, I couldn't find any excuses for Dylan's actions. You're staying here, Paisley said firmly. We have a guest room. It'll be yours. We'll figure something out. I can't impose on you with Ezra, I protested weakly. Mom, Paisley looked me straight in the eyes. You'll never be imposing. You're my mother. This is your home for as long as you want. I started crying again, but this time out of gratitude. She hugged me and stroked my back like I was a little girl, and I thought about how strange life was. Now my daughter was comforting me the way I had once comforted her. Ezra came home from work around 10 o'clock. Paisley told him everything while I was in the shower. When I came out, he was waiting in the hallway, tall and serious, with the frown that always appeared when he was worried. Meryl, he said, coming over and hugging me tightly. I'm so sorry. Please consider this our home. Stay as long as you need. I nodded gratefully, unable to speak. At that moment, I was overwhelmed with gratitude for this part of my family that hadn't turned their backs on me. I couldn't sleep that night in the unfamiliar room. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how quickly life can fall apart. Just 2 weeks ago, I had a home I loved, a daughter I trusted, and a future that seemed clear. Now I was lying in a strange bed, having lost everything except the clothes I was wearing when I ran out of the house. The next morning, Dylan called. I stared at the phone screen, not daring to answer. Finally, gathering my courage, I pressed the green button. Mom, where are you? Her voice sounded irritated. I came over, but you're not home. That's not my home anymore, Dylan, I replied quietly. You made that very clear yesterday. Mom, don't be dramatic, she sighed. I was on edge. I said too much. But the fact remains, the house is going to be sold. Mr. Lang has already signed a preliminary contract. And where do you expect me to live? I told you, I found a great apartment not far from downtown. It's a 1-bedroom but quite spacious, and I'll pay the rent for a year in advance. And then, I asked, what will happen in a year? There was a pause on the line. Mom, Dylan finally said, let's deal with problems as they arise, okay? Right now, the main thing is to sell the house. This is a chance for me and Frank. What about my things? I asked. My clothes, photos, mementos, everything's fine. Nothing will be lost. I'll pack everything up and bring it to you. By the way, where are you? At Paisley's, I replied. I see, she said, her voice tinged with irritation. Have you complained to your big sister yet? Dylan kicked me out of the house. Where did you think I was supposed to go? She didn't answer. We were silent for a few seconds. Then she said, okay, I have to go. I have a meeting with the interior designer. I need to get the house ready for sale. And she hung up without saying goodbye. That day, Paisley and I went to see Roger Pratt. He looked embarrassed when he saw us in his office. Meryl, I'm so sorry, he said, shaking his head. I should have insisted that you spell out the terms of the living arrangement more clearly. Is it possible to contest the gift? Paisley asked bluntly. Roger sighed. Theoretically, yes. You could try to prove that the gift was made under pressure or as a result of misrepresentation. But to be honest, the chances are slim. Mary signed all the documents voluntarily. She was of sound mind and memory. What about emotional pressure? Paisley didn't give up. Dylan clearly manipulated her mother. That's very difficult to prove in court, Roger looked upset. Besides, the legal proceedings could take months, if not years, and they'll cost a lot. Money's no problem, Paisley said firmly. Ezra and I can help. I put my hand on my daughter's shoulder. Paisley, sweetheart, let's not rush into anything. Roger, what about the right to lifetime occupancy? Can Dylan really just evict me? Roger shuffled through the papers on the table. The deed states that you retain the right to lifetime occupancy. Unfortunately, it does not specify the exact location of that occupancy. That gives Dylan some leeway. So she can just find me another place to live and it will be legal? I felt despair rising inside me. If the accommodation meets certain standards of comfort, yes, Roger nodded. But she is obliged to provide you with a roof over your head. That is her obligation under the contract. So she can evict my mother from her own home, which she gave her, and it will be legal? Paisley couldn't believe it. Unfortunately, yes. Roger spread his hands. The law is on the side of the new owner in this case. We left Roger's office feeling depressed. The rain that had started while we were inside matched my mood. We'll hire another lawyer, Paisley said firmly, opening her umbrella. Someone who specializes in cases like this. I nodded, but without much hope. Deep down, I knew the house was lost. The only question was what to do next, how to pick up the pieces of my life. Over the next few days, I tried to settle into Paisley's house. My eldest daughter did her best to make me comfortable. She gave me a shelf in the bathroom, a place in the closet, and even rearranged the family dinner schedule so I could join them after work. Ezra, always calm and level-headed, offered to help me find a new place when I was ready. Ruby and Tim, my teenage grandchildren, tried to support me in their own ways. Ruby offered to teach me how to use some new meditation apps, and Tim brought an old rocking chair from his room, saying that grandmothers were supposed to sit in them. I was grateful to them all, but I couldn't shake the feeling of homelessness. Every morning when I woke up, I momentarily forgot where I was and expected to see the familiar cracks in the ceiling of my bedroom and hear the creaking floorboards on the stairs. Instead, I was greeted by the perfectly smooth surface of the guest room ceiling and the muffled sounds of family life behind the door. On the third day, I returned to the house to collect my things. Dylan had promised to pack them, but I couldn't wait. I needed my clothes, my photos. To my surprise, the door was opened by an unfamiliar woman holding a tablet. "How can I help you?" she asked, looking me over. This is my house," I stammered. I'm Meryl Hollis. I came to get my things." "Oh, Mrs. Hollis," the woman smiled. "Dylan warned us you might stop by. Come in. I'm Veronica, the interior designer. I'm helping get the house ready for sale." I stepped into the foyer and froze in shock. The house, my house, was unrecognizable. The walls in the living room, once beige with green accents, colors Lloyd and I had chosen together, were now painted a nondescript shade of gray. The furniture had been rearranged, many things had disappeared, and in their place were some modern, angular items. What happened? I could hardly recognize my living room. "Oh, we've only just started," Veronica replied enthusiastically. "Neutral tones and minimalist design are what attract buyers today. They want to see potential, not someone's life." Someone's life. My life. The life Lloyd and I had built within these walls for 30 years. The life that was now being stripped away layer by layer, like old wallpaper. "Where are my things?" I asked, feeling my voice tremble. "Oh, Dylan packed most of your personal belongings." Veronica pointed to the boxes stacked in the corner of the dining room. "She said she'd pick them up and bring them to you later." I walked over to the boxes. There were only 5 of them, 5 medium-sized cardboard boxes. My whole life, packed up like merchandise in a warehouse. "That's it?" I couldn't believe it. "What about the rest? The furniture, the books, the dishes?" "Dylan said most of the furniture would stay in the house for show," Veronica shrugged. "And then I suppose it will be sold with the house or separately." With Veronica's help, I carried the boxes downstairs and called a taxi. When the car pulled up, I took one last look at the house I no longer recognized. In my mind, I said goodbye to every corner, every memory these walls held. Over dinner, Paisley told me that rumors were already circulating in town about what had happened. Livewood was a small town, and news spread faster than wildfire. "Carol from the supermarket asked about you," Paisley said, serving salad. "She heard you're not living in your house anymore." "And what did you say?" I felt myself blushing with shame, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. The truth, Paisley replied simply, that you're staying with us temporarily while some issues with your house are being resolved. The next day at the fabric store where I worked, everyone looked at me with sympathy. Mrs. Gardner, the owner, came up to me during my lunch break. Meryl, dear, she put her hand on my shoulder. If you need to take some time off to deal with personal matters, just let me know. Thank you, Eleanor. I appreciated her concern, but I'd rather work. It takes my mind off things. Everyone's saying your youngest kicked you out of the house, she said quietly. Is that true? I sighed, realizing there was no point in denying it. Yes, in a way. I signed the house over to Dylan and she decided to sell it. Eleanor shook her head. Children are so different these days. We would never. Please, I interrupted her. I don't want to talk about it. She squeezed my hand sympathetically and walked away, but I felt the other saleswomen staring at me for the rest of the day. I knew that tomorrow the whole of Livewood would be gossiping about how an ungrateful daughter had thrown her own mother out onto the street. That evening, Paisley came into my room. She sat down on the edge of the bed, fingering an envelope. Mom, I found this in the mailbox this morning, she said, handing me the envelope. It's addressed to you, but it's dated yesterday, so it must have been sent before everything happened. I opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation to the annual city charity dinner. I had been going to it for many years, usually buying one ticket. Last year, I sat at a table with the Morgans, our neighbors, and the Thompsons, who owned a bakery downtown. I don't know if you'll want to go this year, Paisley said uncertainly. But if you do, Ezra and I can come too. I shook my head. I don't think I can. Everyone will ask questions. Discuss. Mom, Paisley took my hand. You have nothing to be ashamed of. It's Dylan who should be hiding, not you. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Mr. Lewis, the principal of Frank's school. Mrs. Hollis? His voice sounded concerned. I'm sorry to bother you, but I can't get through to your daughter Dylan, and you're listed as Frank's emergency contact. Is something wrong with Frank? I was immediately alarmed. No, he's fine. But he refuses to go home. He says he wants to be with you. We tried to contact his mother, but she's not answering. I'll be right there, I said, jumping out of bed. Paisley drove me to school. Frank was sitting on a bench at the entrance, hugging his backpack. When he saw me, his face lit up and he ran toward me. Grandma! He hugged me. I don't want to go home. Can I live with you? I stroked his hair, not knowing what to say. Sweetie, what happened? Why don't you want to go home? Go. Mom told everyone you're moving because it's better for you, he said, not looking at me. But I heard her talking on the phone with Mr. Lang. She said she's selling our house to him. Your house, Grandma, and that you're going to have to live in some apartment. I sighed. Children always notice more than we think they do. Frank, this is a complicated adult situation. Your mom is doing what she thinks is best for both of you. No, he shook his head stubbornly. She lied to you. Grandpa always said you shouldn't lie to people you love. I hugged him tighter, feeling tears welling up in my throat. Let's take you home, I said softly. Your mom must be worried. She's not home, Frank muttered. She's at a meeting with a designer. She said she'd be back late. Just then, Delona's car pulled up. She jumped out without turning off the engine and rushed over to us. Frank! She looked worried. What's going on? The school called. I don't want to go home, Frank said firmly. I want to live with my grandmother. Dylan shot me an accusing look. What did you tell him? Nothing, I shook my head. I just got here. Mr. Lewis called me because he couldn't get through to you. Dylan bit her lip, then turned to her son in a softer tone. Frank, honey, we need to go home. We have a lot to do. We're moving to a new house soon, remember? I told you, you'll have your own big room. I don't want to move to a new house, he repeated stubbornly. I want to stay in our house, with Grandma. Dylan gave me another look, this time almost pleading. Frank, I crouched down in front of my grandson. Listen to me. You're going home with your mom now, and I promise we'll see each other just as often as before. Maybe even more often. Okay? He nodded reluctantly, still sulky but less stubborn. You promise? I promise. I kissed him on the forehead. And you know I always keep my promises. Frank got into Delena's car without even looking at his mother. She stood next to me, shifting awkwardly from one foot to the other. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't do it for you," I replied. "I did it for him. He needs stability, Dylan. Try not to ruin his life with your decisions, too." She flinched as if she had been slapped, but said nothing. She got into her car and drove away without looking back. When Paisley and I got home, there was a call waiting from Roger Pratt. "Meryl," his voice sounded tired. "I just spoke with Dylan. She signed all the papers. The deal will go through in 3 days. Mr. Lang has already made the down payment." "So soon?" I couldn't believe it. It usually takes weeks. "Not when the buyer is so interested and the seller is so motivated." Roger paused. "Meryl, I know this is hard for you to hear right now, but I have to tell you. Delana is getting almost 20% above market value for the house. It's a very good deal." "For her," I said bitterly. "Not for me. She mentioned that she found you an apartment near downtown. It's a studio, but it's in a nice neighborhood, and she'll pay a year's rent in advance." "And then?" Roger sighed heavily. "That's all she said. Meryl, I'm so sorry. If you want to contest the deal, we need to act fast." "No, Roger." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "Let it be. I'm not going to fight my own daughter for a roof over her head." "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Let her live with her decision, and with the consequences." After hanging up, I sat for a long time, staring out the window. In the garden, some white flowers I didn't know the name of were blooming. The wind swayed them slightly, and they nodded at me as if agreeing with something. 3 days had passed since I moved in with Paisley. 3 days that seemed like both a moment and an eternity. During that time, I learned not to wake up thinking I was at home, not to look for my slippers under the bed, not to try to turn on the light switch that wasn't where it used to be. 3 days isn't long for new habits, but when you're 68, time feels different. Everyday loss seems like an irreplaceable loss. That morning, Paisley suggested we go to the mall. I needed to buy a few things, since most of my clothes were still at home. I agreed, even though shopping has never been my favorite activity. The cafe turned out to be a pleasant place with large windows and wooden tables. We ordered coffee and pastries. I barely touched mine, but Paisley didn't seem to notice. She was enthusiastically talking about her plans for the weekend, Tim's school project, and the new hairstyle she was learning for her salon. I listened half-heartedly, glancing out the window, when I saw a familiar car parked across the street. Gordon, Dylan's ex-husband and Frank's father, got out. He always looked a little scruffy, but now he was wearing a formal suit, which surprised me. He usually preferred jeans and t-shirts with IT company logos. Frank got out of the car behind him, carrying a backpack. "Paisley," I interrupted her story. "Look, it's Gordon and Frank." She turned around. "Really? What are they doing here? It's a school day." "I don't know," I frowned. "But Gordon is wearing a suit for some reason. That's strange." We watched as they crossed the street and entered the building opposite. It was a local office center that housed law firms, insurance agencies, and other similar businesses. We finished breakfast and went shopping. Paisley insisted on buying me a new wardrobe. Even though I resisted, I didn't want to be a burden. But my eldest daughter knew how to get her way. We spent almost the entire day at the mall. Over lunch, Paisley suddenly asked, "Do you think Dylan has closed the deal yet?" I sighed. "Roger said the deal is scheduled for today. Mr. Lang has to pay the remaining amount, and the house will officially become his property. And what will she do next?" Paisley didn't hide the animosity in her voice. "Buy herself a new house? Live happily ever after on the money she got from evicting you?" "Paisley, please," I said, rubbing my eyes wearily. "I don't want to talk about it. Not now." We got home around 5 in the evening. Ezra was already there, which surprised Paisley. He usually didn't come home before 7. He looked agitated. "What's going on?" Paisley asked, taking off her coat. "Why are you home so early?" "A client canceled a meeting unexpectedly," he replied. "But it's not important. Dylan called me." I froze, holding the shopping bags in my hands. "What did she want?" Paisley's voice turned cold. "She was looking for you, Meryl." Ezra turned to me. "She said she tried to call your phone." I took my phone out of my bag. Sure enough, there were 3 missed calls from Delona and one message. Mom, call me urgently. It's important. What's wrong? I felt my stomach tighten with worry. Is Frank okay? He's fine, Ezra reassured me. But it sounds like Delona is in trouble. She said Mr. Lang backed out of the deal. What? Paisley couldn't hide her surprise. But why? Roger said everything was ready. Dylon didn't go into details, but from what I gather, Mr. Lang found out about the elderly mother's eviction and decided he didn't want to deal with that kind of house. Or at least that's what she told me. I slowly sank into a chair, not knowing what to feel. Relief that the house wasn't sold? Concern for my daughter who was undoubtedly counting on that money? Or a strange, almost malicious satisfaction that justice had somehow prevailed? She asked you to call her back as soon as possible, Ezra added. I nodded but didn't rush to get my phone. Part of me wanted to contact my daughter immediately, find out the details, maybe even offer my help. But another part, the part that was still hurting from her betrayal, resisted. At that moment, the phone rang again. The screen lit up with Dylan's name. I took a deep breath and answered. Mom? Her voice sounded tense. Finally, I've been trying to reach you all day. I was with Paisley at the mall, I replied calmly. What happened, Dylan? He backed out of the deal, she blurted out. Mr. Lang, he just showed up today and said he changed his mind. He returned the deposit and left. Why? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She faltered. He said he found out how I got the house, that he doesn't want to deal with that kind of property. Something about karma and the energy of the house. Complete nonsense. I was silent, not knowing what to say. Mom, I don't know what to do, she said desperately. I already put a deposit down on a new apartment and ordered furniture. I was counting on that money. Find another buyer, I suggested. I tried, Dylan almost shouted. I called 2 more real estate agents, but it seems like the story has already spread around town. One said outright that it would be difficult to sell a house with such a reputation, and the second offered a price 30% below market value. Dylan, I tried to speak calmly. I don't know how I can help. The house is yours. You wanted to sell it. It's your decision and your problem. But you can come back, she said suddenly. If you come back, we can pretend nothing happened. We'll say you were just visiting Paisley. People will stop talking and I'll find a buyer. I couldn't believe my ears. You want me to come back just so you can sell the house without any problems? Dylan, I'm not coming back, I said firmly. I'm living with Paisley. I'm happy here. And I'm not going to pretend nothing happened. But Mom? No, Dylan. You made your decision. Now live with the consequences. I hung up, feeling strangely relieved. For the first time in a long time, I didn't rush to solve my daughter's problems, didn't sacrifice my interests for her well-being. The next day, Martha, Dylan's colleague from the appliance store, called me. We weren't particularly close, but we sometimes talked when I stopped by my daughter's work. Meryl? Hi, she said quietly, as if afraid of being overheard. I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know. What's wrong, Martha? I asked, tense. Dylan came to work today and everyone, well, everyone's acting kind of strange around her. Someone told them that you kicked her out of your house and now a lot of the employees, are they shunning her? I guessed. Yes, Martha sighed. You know, Meryl, Livewood is a small town. People here don't approve of such behavior. Many of us also care for elderly parents and what Dylan did. I understand, I interrupted her. But Martha, Dylan is still my daughter. I don't want her to be treated badly because of what happened between us. No one is treating her badly, Martha hastened to assure me. It's just, people are disappointed. She always seemed so nice, and now... She fell silent, not knowing how to continue. Thank you for telling me, I said, deciding to end the unpleasant conversation. I appreciate your concern. Frank called that evening. It was unexpected. He didn't usually call me himself. We talked when I visited or when Dylan brought him over. Grandma? His voice sounded uncertain. Are you busy? I always have time for you, sweetheart. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. How are you? Fine, he paused. Grandma, I wanted to ask, can I come visit you? For for the weekend, or even just for the night. I miss you. Of course, dear. I was touched. I miss you too. But you need to ask your mom first. I did, he said, his voice sounding a bit down. She said now's not a good time. She's really busy. I understand, I said carefully. Your mom does have a lot going on right now. She's always on the phone and arguing, Frank continued. And last night she was crying in her room. She thought I couldn't hear her, but I did. Frank, sweetie, I tried to sound calm. Adults sometimes go through difficult times. Your mom is going through one of those times right now. But she loves you, and everything will be all right. I know what she did, he said suddenly. Jimmy from my class said his mom told him that my mom kicked you out of your house. Is that true? It's a complicated situation, Frank, I finally said. Adults sometimes make decisions that seem right at the time. Your mom thought she was doing what was best for both of you. But that's not right, he said stubbornly. Kicking someone out of their home is not right, especially if it's your mom. Frank, I sighed, I don't want you to think badly of your mom because of this. She's still your mom, and she loves you more than anything in the world. I don't want to talk to her. His voice trembled. I told her I want to live with Dad. And you know what? Dad said he's willing to take me. He already talked to some lawyer. I gasped. Frank, this is a very serious decision. Are you sure you want to move in with your dad? Yes, he said firmly. Dad would never do what Mom did. He says she's always been selfish, but he never thought she would do this to you. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of exhaustion and sadness wash over me. I didn't want my family to fall apart like this, for my grandson to distance himself from his mother because of what had happened between us. Frank, listen to me, I said, trying to sound confident. Your mother is going through a difficult time right now. She needs your support, not your judgment. Please don't make any rash decisions. The next day, Paisley told me some news she had heard from one of her clients who worked at a bank. Can you believe it? Dylan tried to get a loan against the house, she said, combing my hair. Betsy says they turned her down. Why? I frowned. The house is paid off. It's worth a lot. It's not about the value of the house. Paisley met my gaze in the mirror. It's about reputation. Banks don't like to take risks, and the story of her mother being evicted from her home makes Dylan an unreliable client in their eyes. I closed my eyes, feeling anxiety building inside me, not for myself, but for Dylan. She was counting on the money from the sale of the house and may have already made some commitments. Now that the deal had fallen through and she couldn't get a loan, her financial situation could become really critical. Dylan called me again that evening. She sounded even more depressed than before. Mom, her voice was hoarse, as if she had been crying for a long time. Mom, I don't know what to do. What's wrong, Dylan? I asked, trying to stay calm. Gordon, she sobbed. He filed for custody review. He wants Frank to live with him, and Frank said he wants to go to his father. He doesn't want to live with me. My heart sank. No matter how angry I was at Delilah for what she had done, I couldn't help but feel for a mother losing her child. Dylan, I said gently, give him time. He's angry right now, but he loves you. You're his mother. But what if he's right? Her voice trembled. What if I really am a terrible person? I kicked my own mother out of the house. Who does that? I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort my daughter, to tell her she wasn't a terrible person, that she had just made a mistake. But another part of me was still hurting from her betrayal. Mom, Dylan continued after a pause, I tried to get a loan from the bank. I offered the house as collateral. They turned me down. They said I was an unreliable customer. I heard, I replied quietly. From where? Her voice sounded surprised, mixed with bitterness. Oh, of course, Livewood. Everyone knows everything about everyone here. Dylan, I decided not to avoid the conversation. What are you going to do next? I don't know, she sounded lost. The house isn't for sale. No one will give me a loan. Frank won't talk to me. My coworkers look at me like I'm a traitor. I'm at a dead end, Mom. Maybe you should move to another city for a while, I suggested. Start with a clean slate. And leave Frank. Her voice became sharp. Never. He's my son, Mom. He's all I have left. That's not what I meant, I sighed. But maybe you need a break from all this. From what? From the consequences of my own actions? She smiled bitterly. No, Mom. I'm staying here. I'll fight for Frank. And I'll figure out this stupid house somehow. I wanted to say something else, but she had already hung up. 2 more days passed. I didn't call Dylan and she didn't get in touch. I thought about her, worried, but didn't know how to help. Or to be honest with myself, I wasn't sure I wanted to help. On the 3rd day, the doorbell rang. It was almost midnight, and Paisley and I looked at each other. Who could be coming so late? Ezra went to answer the door. A minute later, he returned to the living room, followed by Delona. She looked terrible. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were swollen from crying, and her clothes were wrinkled. Delona? Paisley got up from the couch. What happened? She looked at me, then at her sister. I just wanted to see Mom, can I? Paisley gave me a questioning look. I nodded, and she took Ezra by the hand and left the room, leaving us alone with Dylan. My youngest daughter stood in the middle of the living room, looking so lost, so small, that my heart ached again. No matter what she had done, she was still my child. Sit down, I said, patting the sofa next to me. She sat down next to me, still not looking at me. I ruined everything, Mom, she finally said. Everything. Absolutely everything. What happened? I asked, even though I already knew. Gordon took Frank today. The judge issued a temporary custody order pending a court decision. He said I was unstable, that I couldn't provide Frank with proper care. And Frank? Her voice broke. Frank didn't want to say goodbye to me. He packed his things and left with his father without even looking back. I was silent, not knowing what to say. And then I came home, to that empty, strange house where everything had been changed for the sale that never happened. She ran her hand over her face, and there was no one there. No Frank, no you. Just me, alone. She finally looked me in the eyes, and I saw so much pain, so much regret, that I involuntarily reached out and covered her hand with mine. I sat there in that empty house I had dreamed of and realized that I had lost everything, Dylan said quietly. Frank, you, people's respect. Everything I cared about, I destroyed with my own hands. And for what? For a house that no one wants to buy now. For money I never got. She covered her face with her hands and finally let the tears flow. Her shoulders shook with sobs, and I hugged her, pulling her close to me like I used to when she was little and afraid of something. I don't know how I'm going to go on, Mom, she whispered through her tears. I've ruined everything. And at that moment, looking at my crying daughter, I realized that despite all the pain she had caused me, I still loved her. That no matter how terrible her mistake was, she was already paying for it in full. 2 weeks had passed since that evening when Dylan sat crying in Paisley's living room. 2 weeks that changed a lot, but at the same time left the most important thing unchanged, the pain of betrayal that seemed to have settled in my soul forever. During those 2 weeks, I had almost settled into the Paisley home. I had my own little chores. I helped with the cooking and sometimes picked Tim up from school when Paisley was late at the salon. Ruby and I even started a project to sew curtains for the living room. My experience working in a fabric store finally came in handy in family matters. I learned most of what I knew about Dylan from Frank, who called me every couple of days. He was staying with his father temporarily, but judging by his tone, his initial enthusiasm for the change was already waning. Gordon was a good father, but he wasn't used to having a child around all the time. He often stayed late at work, leaving Frank with a neighbor. Grandma, Dad promised to take me to the park on Saturday, but he has some urgent project again, Frank complained during our last conversation. Now I'll have to stay home with Mrs. Wilson. She's a terrible cook and she smells like cats. I smiled involuntarily. Frank had always been blunt in his assessments. How's your mom? I asked cautiously. Have you talked to her? Frank paused. A little, he finally replied. She calls every day, and she came to school last week. She brought me a new construction set. That's good. I tried to sound neutral. Your mom loves you very much, Frank. I know, he sighed. She looks sad. And she's lost weight. Dad says she just needs to grow up and learn to take responsibility for her actions. I bit my lip to keep from saying anything harsh about Gordon. Frank shouldn't be caught in the middle. Grandma, he asked suddenly, are you still mad at Mom? I thought about it. Was I angry? The anger that had consumed me after Dylan's betrayal was gradually subsiding, giving way to weary sadness. No, sweetie, I finally replied. I'm not angry. Your mom and I just need some time to figure things out. After talking to Frank, I sat on the porch for a long time, watching Tim play basketball with the neighborhood boys. They were a little younger than Frank, but just as energetic, just as full of life. I remembered how Dylan loved to play with the boys when she was little, how she would race them, climb trees, and come home with scraped knees and sparkling eyes. What had happened to that girl? When had she turned into a woman capable of kicking her own mother out of the house? Lost in thought, I didn't immediately notice Paisley sitting down next to me on the porch steps. What are you thinking about? She asked, handing me a cup of tea. The past, I replied honestly. What Dylan was like as a child and how we got to where we are now. Peasy sighed. I never understood her, she admitted. Even as a child, she was always so unpredictable, emotional. She did whatever came into her head without thinking about the consequences. You always planned everything, I smiled. Even your pranks. Peasy laughed. Yeah, I guess I was a terrible kid. But Mom, don't you see? Dylan will never change. She'll always make impulsive decisions and then expect someone else, usually you, to fix the consequences. I thought about it. Peasy was right. Dylan did act impulsively a lot. But don't children make mistakes? Isn't it a parent's job to help them, to support them, even when they slip up? She's my daughter, Paisley, I said quietly. Just like you. And I love you both, regardless of your mistakes. Paisley shook her head. You've always been too soft on her, she said, a note of accusation in her voice. You've always forgiven her more than you forgive me. That's not true, I protested. I've never treated you differently. Maybe you didn't think so, Paisley said stubbornly. But it was. When I got a B instead of an A, you were disappointed. And when Dylan dropped out of college, you said, well, it's not her path. I wanted to argue, but suddenly I realized that Paisley was right. I did hold my daughters to different standards. I expected perfection from Paisley because I knew she was capable of it. And I forgave Dylan for a lot because... Why? Because I thought she was more fragile, less capable of handling life. The sound of a car pulling up interrupted our conversation. Paisley tensed, staring at the approaching vehicle. It's Dylan, she said, her voice cold. The car stopped in front of our house. Dylan got out, looking around uncertainly. She was holding a bag of some kind. She looked haggard and pale, nothing like the confident woman who had coldly told me 2 weeks ago that I had to vacate the house. Hi, she said uncertainly as she approached the porch. Can I come in? Paisley looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I nodded. Of course, Paisley said, although her tone made it clear that she would have preferred to refuse. Come in. The three of us entered the house. Delia nervously crumpled the bag in her hands, which, as it turned out, contained a pie. I baked it, she said, handing it to Paisley. I know it's silly, but I remembered how Mom always said you shouldn't visit empty-handed. Paisley took the pie with a stony face. Thanks, she said dryly. I'll make some tea. She went into the kitchen, leaving Delona and me alone in the living room. My younger daughter sat down uncertainly on the edge of the sofa, clearly feeling uncomfortable. How's Frank? I asked, trying to break the awkward silence. Better, Delona smiled weakly. He's talking to me again. He even agreed to spend the weekend with me when the court decides on custody. That's good, I nodded. Frank loves you, Delona. He just needs time. I know, she lowered her eyes. Mom, I came to talk. About what happened. About what I did. At that moment, Paisley returned with a tray of teacups. She silently placed the tray on the coffee table and sat down in the armchair opposite us. Go ahead, she said, looking at her sister. We're listening. Dylan took a deep breath. I made a terrible mistake, she began, looking me in the eyes. What I did to you, Mom, it's unforgivable. I know that. and I understand if you can never forgive me." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "When you signed the house over to me, I saw an opportunity to start a new life, to secure Frank's future, to finally be independent, and I fixated on that idea without thinking about what it meant to you." "Not just to Mom," Paisley interjected. "Did you think about what it would mean to Frank, to see his mother kick his grandmother out of her home?" Dylan paled even more. "No," she said quietly. "I didn't think about that. I didn't think about anything except the money I could get from selling the house. I was obsessed with the idea." "And now?" I asked. "What are you going to do next?" Dylan looked up at me. "I came to ask for forgiveness," she said, "and to give the house back. To you, legally. It's your house, Mom. It always has been and always will be." There was a long silence. I looked at my younger daughter, so lost, so remorseful. Part of me wanted to agree immediately, take the house and return to my old life. But another part of me understood that nothing would ever be the same again. "What about you?" I asked. "What about Frank?" Dylan shrugged. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "I'll find another apartment, I guess. I'll save up for a down payment on my own place. It's not that important." "It is important," I insisted. "You're my daughter, Dylan, and Frank is my grandson. Your future is important to me." "After what I did?" she asked incredulously. "Even after that," I nodded. Paisley made a sound that sounded like a snort, but I didn't pay any attention to it. "Dylan," I continued, "why did you do that? I'm not talking about selling the house. I'm talking about how you told me to leave. How could you say those words?" Dylan lowered her head, and I saw tears dripping onto her clenched hands. "I was angry," she whispered. "At you, at the whole world, at myself. I've felt like a failure my whole life, especially around Paisley. She was always perfect, smart, organized, successful, and I always messed everything up. Everything I ever tried." Paisley listened with an unreadable expression on her face. "And when you signed the house over to me, at first I was so grateful," Dylan continued. "But then I started thinking that you didn't do it because you believed in me, but because you felt sorry for me. Because you think I'm incapable of doing anything without your help." "That's not true," I said quietly. "Maybe," Dylan shrugged, "but I believed it. And that thought was eating away at me. And then the opportunity to sell the house came up. To get the money. To prove that I could support myself and Frank. To be independent. By evicting your own mother?" Paisley couldn't help but ask. "I didn't think of it that way." Dylan looked at her sister. "I convinced myself that it would be best for everyone. That Mom would be happier in an apartment where she didn't have to shovel snow or fix a leaky roof. That Frank would get a better education. That I would finally be worthy." "Worthy of what?" I asked. "Respect," she replied simply. "Yours, Paisley, my own. I'm so tired of being a constant disappointment." I felt something tighten in my chest. Had I really made my daughter feel this way? Had my concern, my support, been perceived by her as a constant reminder of her inadequacy? "Dylan," I took her hand, "I have never considered you a disappointment, never." "Really?" She looked up at me with the reddened eyes. "What about you, Paisley? You always thought I was irresponsible and unreliable, didn't you?" Paisley hesitated. I, she faltered. "It's not that I thought you were unreliable. We just have different approaches to life. I like to plan. You like to be spontaneous." "That's a diplomatic way of saying yes," Dylan said with a bitter smile. "Okay." Paisley straightened up. "Yes, sometimes I thought you were irresponsible. When you dropped out of college, when you changed jobs every 6 months, when you got pregnant without being sure Gordon would marry you, when—" "Paisley," I said warningly. "No, Mom, let her talk," Dylan said, looking straight at her sister. "I want to hear it." "When you constantly asked Mom for money," Paisley continued. "When you let her solve your problems instead of dealing with them yourself. Yes, at times like that, I thought you were irresponsible." Dylan nodded. "I know," she said quietly. "And you're right. I was like that. Maybe I still am. But you know what, Paisley? I've always envied you. Your confidence, Your ability to be in control. Everything I lacked. Paisley looked surprised. You envied me? Of course, Dylan smiled weakly. You were always the perfect older sister, the straight A student, the best at everything. How could I not be jealous? Paisley was silent, clearly thinking about what she had heard. But that doesn't excuse what I did, Dylan continued, turning to me. Nothing excuses it. I hurt you, Mom, and I regret it every minute of every day. I looked at my younger daughter, saw the sincerity in her eyes, heard the remorse in her voice. And I felt the wall I had built around my heart after her betrayal begin to crack. I believe you, I finally said. And I accept your apology. Really? Hope flashed in her eyes. Yes, I nodded. But reconciliation doesn't happen overnight, Dylan. Trust has to be rebuilt. I know. She squeezed my hand. I'm ready. For anything. I'll give you the house back. I'll call Roger today. I wondered. Did I want to go back to the house? After everything that had happened there? And what would happen to Dylan and Frank? No, I finally decided. You don't have to give me the house back. What? Dylan and Paisley exclaimed in unison. The house will remain yours, I said, looking at Dylan. But I have another solution. Let's live there together. You, me, and Frank, when he's ready. The house is big enough for all of us. Dylan looked at me in amazement. You want to live with me? After what I did? You're my daughter, I replied simply. And I want to be part of your life, and Frank's life. Mom, are you sure? Paisley looked worried. What if she does it again? She won't, Dylan said firmly. I promise. Never. Paisley still looked unconvinced, but she didn't say anything. Then it's settled, I smiled. I'll come home, and we'll try to start over. Dylan smiled uncertainly in response. Thank you, Mom, she whispered. You're giving me more than I deserve. Maybe, I agreed. But that's what love is, isn't it? Giving more than they deserve. Paisley looked at us with a complicated expression on her face, a mixture of disbelief, concern, and perhaps a tiny bit of hope. If that's what you've decided, Mom, she finally said, I'll support you. But Dylan, she turned to her sister, if you ever hurt her again, I won't, Dylan replied firmly. Never. That night, lying in Paisley's guest bedroom, I thought about the decision I had made. Was it the right one? Had I forgiven my daughter too quickly? Was I risking being hurt again? But then I thought about Dylan's words, about how she had felt her whole life that she wasn't good enough, wasn't successful enough compared to her sister, about how my attempts to help her were perceived as confirmation of her inadequacy, and about how perhaps the best way to help her now was not to solve her problems for her, but to be there for her while she solved them herself. A week later, I returned home. The gray walls had been repainted in warm colors. My furniture, which Dylon hadn't had time to sell, was back in its place. My photos were hanging on the walls again. But something had changed. This house would never be the same again. Too much had happened within its walls. Frank was thrilled with the new arrangement. The judge allowed him to spend weekdays with his mother and grandmother and weekends with his father. And although Dylan still looked tense around me, and I still flinched when she raised her voice, we were learning to live together again, not like before, as mother and obedient daughter, but as two grown women who respected each other's boundaries. Paisley visited us every week, at first watching our attempts at reconciliation with some wariness. But gradually she began to thaw, especially when she saw how sincerely Dylan was trying to make amends for her mistake. You know, Paisley said to me one day as we sat on the porch drinking tea and watching Dylan and Frank play badminton on the lawn, I never thought I'd say this, but I think Dylan has really changed. She hasn't changed, I shook my head. She's grown up. We all grow up, Paisley. Sometimes through mistakes, sometimes through pain. But it's not how many times we fall that matters. It's that we find the strength to get up and keep going. Paisley looked thoughtfully at her sister. Maybe you're right, she said finally. Maybe I've always been too hard on her. Maybe I wasn't hard enough, I smiled. Maybe, as usual, the truth lies somewhere in between. We sat in cozy silence, enjoying the warm evening and the sounds of laughter coming from the lawn. I didn't know what the future would bring. I didn't know how many more ups and downs awaited us on this road to rebuilding trust. But at that moment, looking at my daughters and grandson, I felt one thing: hope. Hope that despite all the mistakes and hurt, love was still stronger than anything else. The house that had once been a source of discord could now become a place of reconciliation. Not perfect, not instantaneous, but real. With difficulties, with doubts, with occasional returns of mistrust, but also with the opportunity to start all over again. This time wiser, more tolerant, and kinder to each other. And perhaps this is the true meaning of forgiveness, not in forgetting past grievances, but in the willingness, despite them, to build a new future.